Once, under the bright glow of Hollywood's golden lights, there stood a woman whose beauty could quiet an entire room. Dorothy Dandridge, elegant, fearless, unforgettable. Her face was everywhere, yet no one truly saw her. She made history as the first black woman ever nominated for an Academy Award. For a brief, dazzling moment, she seemed untouchable, the embodiment of progress in a world still afraid of change. But behind that perfect smile was a battle she was never meant to win. Hollywood adored her image, but not her truth. It celebrated her grace while quietly closing its doors. Dorothy's story wasn't about fading fame. It was about being erased by the same world that once called her its muse. Because in Hollywood, beauty can build your legend, or bury it. Dorothy Jean Dandridge entered the world in 1922, born into struggle but destined for brilliance. Raised by her mother, Ruby, a performer who refused to be forgotten, Dorothy learned early that art could be both survival and rebellion. She started as part of the Dandridge sisters, singing in smoky clubs where laughter and jazz blurred into the night. Each song carried a promise that one day she would be more than a voice in the background. That promise came true with Carmen Jones, 1954. Her performance wasn't just acting, it was power, elegance, and raw emotion colliding in one unforgettable moment. When the Oscar nomination came, it wasn't only for her, it was for every woman who had been told she didn't belong. For a moment, Dorothy Dandridge became Hollywood's newest symbol of hope. But even symbols cast shadows. And soon, she would learn that in Hollywood, the higher the pedestal, the deeper the fall. Dorothy's beginnings were far from glamorous. Born into poverty in Cleveland, she grew up watching her mother perform in small theaters, learning that applause was both a gift and a shield. From the moment she could walk, Dorothy followed the rhythm of her mother's footsteps, straight toward the stage. As part of the Dandridge sisters, she sang across the country, charming audiences who rarely saw women of color in the spotlight. Her voice shimmered smooth as silk, layered with pain and pride. But Dorothy wasn't satisfied with applause. She wanted to change the stage itself. Hollywood noticed her beauty before her talent. They offered her roles that looked dazzling but felt hollow. The dancer, the exotic girl, the ornament. She accepted them at first, because she had to. But inside, she waited for the one role that would let her exist rather than decorate. That role came with Carmen Jones. Dorothy burned through the screen, sensual, defiant, magnetic. The world finally looked at her not as a dream, but as a force. And in that glow of triumph, she smiled, not knowing that the same light would one day consume her. Fame came to Dorothy like a sudden storm, brilliant, loud, and impossible to control. She was photographed, idolized, and praised as the woman who had changed Hollywood's rules. But beneath the headlines, she remained an outsider to the dream she had built. Hollywood loved her image but feared her reality. They invited her to their parties, but not to their tables. She could grace the screen, but never share the kiss, the love, or the stories given to white actresses. Every success came with a reminder you are only welcome on their terms. Her romance with director Otto Preminger became both her rebellion and her undoing. In a time when such love was forbidden, she dared to follow her heart, and the world punished her for it. Studios grew cold, contracts vanished, and her once bright name dimmed beneath rumors and judgment. Worse still, she was betrayed by those closest to her. Her finances crumbled as others profited from her trust. Behind every red carpet appearance was a woman breaking quietly under the weight of control. Dorothy had conquered Hollywood's stage, but not its rules. And the more she shined, the more they wanted to turn off her light. By the early 1960 seconds, the woman who once defined beauty for a generation was barely visible. The scripts stopped coming, the photographers stopped calling. Hollywood had moved on to new names, safer faces, cleaner stories. Dorothy Dandridge had become a memory in a business that forgets fast. To survive, she returned to the clubs, performing in dim lights where the smoke hung heavy, and applause sounded tired. Yet even then, she performed with the same grace, her voice softer, her smile thinner, but her dignity unbroken. Money was gone. The fame had turned to whispers. But the real loss was deeper, the quiet understanding that talent alone was never enough. She had fought for a place in history, only to find that history had no room for her name. By 1965, her loneliness had become its own shadow. Friends spoke of her exhaustion, of how she seemed caught between trying again and letting go. Then, one September day, the news came Dorothy Dandridge was gone, found alone in her apartment. The world called it an accident. Those who loved her called it the ending she'd been walking toward for years, one small step at a time. Her light didn't fade. It was quietly stolen by the silence she carried too long. When the news of her death broke, Hollywood barely blinked. A few lines in the papers, a recycled photo from her glory days, then nothing. The same city that once bathed her in light now treated her absence as a brief inconvenience. Her funeral was small, quiet, and heartbreakingly simple. There were no grand speeches, no film tributes, no reporters crowding the chapel. Only her mother, Ruby, and a few loyal friends who stood in silence, not just mourning her loss, but the injustice of how quickly the world had moved on. Dorothy had once been the promise of a new Hollywood, the face that proved talent had no color. But in the end, she became its cautionary tale. The cameras that had once adored her now turned away, afraid to face the truth of what they'd helped destroy. She left behind no riches, no spotlight, only questions and an unfinished dream. But sometimes, silence speaks louder than applause. And in that silence, Dorothy Dandridge became something larger than fame. She became a ghost that haunted Hollywood's conscience. For decades, Dorothy Dandridge's story was little more than a whisper. A legend passed between those who still remembered the first black woman who dared to challenge Hollywood's impossible walls. But time has a way of bringing ghosts back into the light. In 1999, Halle Berry stepped into her story with introducing Dorothy Dandridge. It wasn't just a performance, it was a resurrection. Halle's portrayal reignited the conversation, reminding the world of the woman who walked so others could run. When she accepted her own Oscar 3 years later, she dedicated it to Dorothy. The circle had finally closed. Today, every black actress standing in the glow of a camera lens owes part of that light to her. Dorothy's legacy lives in every performance that refuses to apologize, in every face that defies expectation. Audiences rewatch Carmen Jones and see more than a film, they see resistance, wrapped in beauty and fire. Dorothy Dandridge didn't vanish. She transcended, turning pain into power and silence into immortality. Dorothy Dandridge's life remains one of the most haunting reflections of Hollywood's double-edged dream, a world that worships what it can't control and destroys what dares to shine too freely. She was both muse and martyr, perfection and pain woven into one unforgettable face. Fame gave her the stage, but the world never gave her peace. Every smile hid the strain of surviving in a system built to silence her voice. Yet even through heartbreak, she never surrendered her elegance, her dignity, or her fire. Her story is not just about loss, it's about resistance. The courage to stand alone in a spotlight that was never meant to include her. She may have fallen, but her shadow still moves through every actress, every song, every frame that refuses to be defined by rules. Dorothy Dandridge's light was dimmed, but never extinguished. Because some stars aren't meant to fade, they're meant to remind us what light costs. What do you feel when you hear her name, Dorothy Dandridge? The beauty, the tragedy, or the strength to stand where no one else could? If her story reached you, share it. Say her name out loud. Because remembrance is its own form of justice, and every time we tell her story, we give her light back to the world. Tell us in the comments what part of her journey stayed with you the most. Like, share, and subscribe to help uncover the truths behind the faces Hollywood tried to forget. Fame and shadows, every star has its story.